Saint Fatty had an interview with Fox News yesterday, and apparently he's still stewing about a joke I made about him at the Oscars. Now look, Jimmy Kimmel is every night he hits me. I guess his ratings are terrible. He's not a talented guy. I hear he hits me all the time. So I figured I'd hit him because I thought he was a lousy host. Mr. Donald Trump has said I'm not talented so many times Eric is starting to get jealous. I love this. I love that this bothered him so much. The room looked perfect at first glance. Gold lighting spilling down from every angle, red carpet stretched tight like a runway, A-list faces glowing under studio lights, the kind of television night that is designed from top to bottom to look effortless and untouchable. But all it took was one joke, one reaction, and two late-night hosts standing on two different stages to turn Donald Trump into the biggest punchline on American television. What happened next was not ordinary comedy. It felt like watching a public unraveling happen in real time, broadcast across two separate stages in front of millions of people who all suddenly noticed the same pattern at the exact same moment. And once they saw it, they could not unsee it. It started at the Oscars. Jimmy Kimmel was doing what every host does on a night like that, working through his monologue, keeping the energy warm, the jokes light, letting the audience settle into the comfortable rhythm of the evening. Everything was moving the way it was supposed to move. Smooth, easy, predictable. Then someone from the production team whispered something into his ear that changed the entire night. Trump had gone live on Truth Social. In the middle of the ceremony, while millions of people were watching, he posted a blistering attack calling Kimmel a terrible host, criticizing the broadcast, throwing out the usual cocktail of insults, the kind of post designed to sting and dominate the conversation. Has there ever been a worse host than Jimmy Kimmel at the Oscars? His opening was that of a less-than-average person trying too hard to be something which he is not and never can be. Get rid of Kimmel and perhaps replace him with another washed-up but cheap ABC talent, George Stephanopoulos. He would make everybody on stage look bigger, stronger, and more glamorous. Blah, blah, blah. Make America great again. Now, most hosts would have let that slide. Most shows would have moved on without a blink. The smart play, the safe play, is always to ignore the grenade and keep walking. Kimmel did not walk. He picked up the grenade. He pulled out his phone right there on the Oscar stage, read Trump's post word for word to the entire room, and then looked straight into the camera with a grin spreading across his face and delivered a sharp, perfectly timed line about Trump's bedtime. Okay, right before bed. He expected two things when he woke up on St. Patrick's Day. Expected to see green water in the toilet bowl. Apparently that's the color leprechauns pee. And he wanted some kind of Easter Bunny-style candy basket. We're like, no, that's not St. Patrick's Day. This is like, you don't get candy on St. Patrick's Day. The room did not politely clap. The room exploded. Real laughter, loud and immediate. The kind of laughter that fills a hall from floor to ceiling and makes the chandeliers tremble. In that single instant, the entire power dynamic flipped like a coin spinning in the air. Trump had tried to dominate the moment from outside the building. He tried to reach through Truth Social and seize control of the biggest night in Hollywood. But Kimmel grabbed him by the wrist, dragged him inside the room, and turned him into the punchline before anyone could catch their breath. And Kimmel was not done. Not even close. The very next night, he came back even sharper. He mocked Trump's approval numbers. He pointed out how bizarre it was that the White House, the actual White House, seemed more focused on a late-night comedian than on running the country. The humor landed hard because the imbalance was so obvious it was almost painful. A sitting president, dealing with wars and budgets and crises that affect hundreds of millions of lives, spending his nights glued to a television screen, furiously typing about a man who tells jokes for a living. Kimmel leaned into that contrast like a boxer leaning into a jab. If Trump truly did not care, why was he watching so closely? Why was he reacting at all? Why give the comedian exactly what he wants? Proof that the joke hit. President once again made time to mention his favorite, me. He's doing really well. Totally dominates the late night. Totally dominates, I guess, these morons that they have at the Kimmel. What bad people. Thank you. You know, Donald, you mentioned me over the last 4 days. You mentioned me 3 times now in 4 days, and I just want you to know, I'm thinking about you too, girl. That line landed like a slap wrapped in velvet. The audience howled. Not because it was mean, because it was precise, because it took a man who projects dominance and iron control, and reframed him as someone who cannot stop thinking about a comedian on television. And when you put it that way, the absurdity becomes impossible to ignore. But here is where the story takes a turn that nobody expected, because while Kimmel was handling the direct confrontation, Stephen Colbert entered the picture from an entirely different angle, and his approach was surgical, where Kimmel focused on Trump's emotional reactions, the late-night posts, the name-calling, the thin-skinned outbursts. Colbert focused on something deeper. He focused on the pattern behind the reactions, the machinery underneath the anger. He zeroed in on one particular story that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Trump's grand plan to build an enormous ballroom inside the White House. Yesterday, as part of his White House ballroom project, he sent out a backhoe to rip off a chunk of the East Wing. That is it. We are not giving him the security deposit back, but it's so deeply unsettling. It's like being a kid. We're just, as I said, we're just 9 months into Trump's term, and he's going Hulk smash on the White House. The audience cheered. They laughed. But underneath the laughter, there was something heavier sitting in the room like a stone. Colbert was not just making a joke, he was building a frame, a flashy, oversized golden vision tied more to image than to necessity. Trump had publicly claimed the project would not interfere with anything important, but the signs told a different story. Colbert laid the contradiction flat on the table and let the audience see it for themselves. Then he made the joke about the security deposit, and the room cracked open. But the real blade was not the punchline. It was the framing underneath it. Colbert was asking a question without ever saying it directly. Why the obsession with spectacle? Why the chandeliers and the marble and the presentation? Why shift everyone's eyes toward something shiny and grand while something serious sits untouched in the corner? Why build a ballroom when the house itself is on fire? That question stuck in the air like smoke, and it would not blow away. Kimmel picked it up and pushed it even further the next night, making jokes about withheld transparency and comparing Trump's behavior to someone hiding from responsibility behind a curtain of noise and distraction. The joke landed clean because it took something complicated, something that would normally require paragraphs of explanation, and compressed it into a single image that anyone could understand in 2 seconds flat. And together, night after night, they built a picture so clear it was almost impossible to argue with. Kimmel made Trump look petty. Colbert made him look predictable. And both of them, working from different stages in different cities, made him look smaller than the image he projects to the world. That is the thing Trump struggles with more than anything. He can absorb anger. He can fight criticism head-on. He has been doing that his entire life. But mockery, especially mockery built carefully from his own words, his own posts, his own actions played back in his own voice. That is a different kind of weapon entirely. It does not attack from the outside. It comes from the inside, and there is no wall that keeps it out. Kimmel read Trump's post back to the world. Colbert replayed Trump's own claims with the volume turned up. The accuracy of it all was what made the humor so sharp and so impossible to dismiss. These were not exaggerations. These were mirrors, and mirrors do not lie. As the reactions from Trump and his allies grew louder, spreading into threats toward networks, public calls for investigations, pressure on advertisers, whispers about FCC involvement, the pattern only became clearer. The more they pushed back, the more they proved the comedian's point. The cycle fed itself. Outrage became punchline, became outrage, became punchline, spinning faster and faster until the whole thing looked less like politics and more like a man chasing his own shadow across a brightly lit stage. Then Colbert did something unexpected. He brought Kimmel onto his own show. The two of them sat together on the same stage, trading jokes, finishing each other's sentences, building on each other's observations. And beneath all the laughter, there was a sharper point hiding in plain sight. Why would a leader, someone with genuine power over people's lives, take personal satisfaction in watching people lose their jobs simply because those people made fun of him? That question cut deeper than any single joke could, because it stepped outside comedy entirely and walked straight into the territory of character, of temperament, of what kind of person holds the codes. And still, through all of it, Trump kept feeding the machine, posting, reacting, responding, repeating the exact same cycle in real time, as if he could not see that every response became another clip, another headline, another punchline waiting to be delivered. That is exactly why the clips spread like wildfire. The audience was not just watching comedy. They were watching something much rarer and much more revealing. They were watching the most powerful man in the country become visibly, undeniably, publicly affected by jokes. A man who builds his entire identity on control. Control of the room, control of the narrative, control of what people think and say and feel. Being pulled, slowly and unmistakably, into the role of someone reacting instead of leading. responding instead of shaping the moment, chasing instead of commanding. By the time the dust settled, the takeaway felt as simple and as sharp as a paper cut. Kimmel took Trump's live rant and turned it into one of the most defining television moments of the year. Colbert took a flashy construction project and turned it into a symbol of distraction, ego, and misplaced priorities. Together, working on different nights from different cities, they proved something that no amount of Truth Social posts or legal threats could undo. Even someone trying to control every single narrative in the country can still be undone by three things: timing, replay, and a perfectly delivered line. That is why those moments went viral. Not because they were loud, not because they were angry, because they were clear, crystal clear. Trump wanted attention. Kimmel and Colbert gave it to him, in the worst possible form, as a punchline. And the audience, millions of them, laughed not because they were told to, but because for one brief, unmistakable moment, the joke was the truest thing on television.